Okay, good to go. Last but not least, I'm delighted to welcome Alicia Paz, who is she's working here on as part of our Artists in Residence programme at CFPR, along with Chuck and with Tracy as well. And it's been great to have Alicia because she's been making a lot of really exciting things, and she's come from Chatsworth House and another residency with Sheffield Art Space.
S1 Art Space.
S1 Art Space. And so what we're planning to do once Alicia has completed her residency here. So what she was doing lots of photography and absorbing lots of amazing kind of rich visual information from Chatsworth House. I'm sure you're going to be talking about that now. And for us to then kind of create a collaborative project at the end of this residency, which will kind of be in Sheffield and around Bristol as well. So I'm very excited to hear a sort of a summation, maybe sort of a halfway point, a third-way point.
Yes.
So this is a good milestone here to take stock. So thank you. Over to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Karina, for the lovely introduction. And it's a very hard act to follow after all these fantastic presentations today. So I'm very humbled and very inspired by what I've seen today. I'm definitely much more lo-fi. I'm kind of allergic to things digital. I'm primarily, so I'm very much out of my comfort zone and learning loads while I've been here. It's been a real treat and a privilege. I'm primarily a painter, although increasingly working in a kind of expanded painting field, developing dialogue with other means of expression. So I'm mainly going to talk about my residency project and my research of this year, but I will begin by showing you just a few images, a handful of images of my practice in general, just to shed some light on my concerns and interests. So there's a very early work from the 90s. Throughout my practice, I've been interested in quotations and copies, references to art history, also layering images and mise en abîme, like a painting inside another painting. I'm interested in representations of artists and the act of art making. I really enjoy the Rococo and Baroque periods and the sense of theatricality and awareness of artifice that we find in these art historical periods. I'm also looking at different ways of mark making between the cultured mark and the vernacular. I often look at decorative arts and applied arts for inspiration as well, ceramics and furniture, textiles. Most of my paintings are quite large, so there's a shift in scale regarding I might use an object for inspiration that is very small, but blown up to different scale, it operates differently. This is a more recent work. This is from about 2010. So I focus primarily on female figures as protagonists in my painted scenarios. In this particular body of work, or in this series, I was building up texture with a lot of mixed media. There's a kind of fantastical landscape developing or emerging. This is another body of work I did on paper. They're kind of assemblages. So there's a lot of paint and collage and materiality. The textures are about an inch thick, and they sit within box frames under glass, so that protects the texture. So I'm very interested in optical space and physical space, the kind of back and forth between materiality and the illusion of materiality. I'm also interested in silhouettes and the shadows cast by silhouettes. And so I began developing flat sculptures as companion pieces to my paintings. These works represent artists, or in the performative sense, like actresses or opera singers or acrobats. And they're double-sided, like actresses, they're two-faced. So they're slightly similar and yet different at the same time on either side. So looking at costume and attire. So there's about 6 or 7 works in this ensemble. And that working with sculpture as a flat surface led to this commission of a public art piece I was asked to do by a museum in East Germany, in Magdeburg. It represents women, representations of women from many different cultural and historical sources, from comic books to expressionist films to paintings, all kinds of different contexts. And all the women are having a kind of conversation within the tree that they inhabit across time and across cultures. Oh, it's sorry, it's enamel on steel. And I developed the enamel. I learned to work with enamel with the help of Elizabeth Terrell, who's an enamel expert based here in Bristol. I'm also interested in identity and family trees. So these are kind of fantastical family trees accompanied by a giant ceramic necklace. So I've dabbled a little bit in ceramics as well, using the female ornamentation in the way of a necklace as a sculptural installation. And this is a very recent body of work in which I copied in oil paint existing blue and white tiles from different parts of the world. Some are from my native Mexico, some are from the west of England, from the Netherlands, Portugal, and Brazil. And I brought also my own imagery to do with women's history. And the series deals with female expression and shared creativity and shared histories, and a kind of dialogue again across time and across culture between different historical female characters. Oops, sorry. And then another series that I worked on is in photography. I developed body work with photograms. So I kind of approach other media as a painter. So if I do photography, I'm going to approach it as a painter in a very kind of cut and paste, sort of scissors and tape way. And I did a residency at the Leonora Carrington Museum in Mexico in 2019. Yeah, you probably know Leonora Carrington was an Anglo-Irish surrealist artist who settled in Mexico after the World War II. So there's a museum dedicated to her in San Luis Potosí. And I had only 2 months to create a solo show in a quite large gallery. So I thought, okay, it's going to be photograms because I know I can make a whole bunch in a short amount of time. And so I developed a body of portraits, incorporating different elements, pattern, masks, photos, period photographs, or images of sculpture, and also necklaces. Okay, so that brings me to the current project at CFPR in partnership with Chatsworth House and S1 Art Space in Sheffield. I did the research part of the project at Chatsworth House in the summer of this year. And I've been at CFPR here in Bristol since beginning of October. And everything will culminate in a solo show at Sheffield S1 Art Space in June. And also with a show, as Karina mentioned, probably here at the university at some point. We will determine a date. So this is an aerial view of Chatsworth House. If you haven't ever been, it's in Derbyshire near Chesterfield. I really, really recommend it. It's a great experience. It's a really extraordinary place. The staff are fantastic, very generous with their knowledge, very friendly. Then the grounds are beautiful. While I was doing the research at Chatsworth, I was living in Park Hill Estate, which is a brutalist concrete housing estate in the center of Sheffield. So kind of a huge contrast with Chatsworth. And it's half an hour away by bus. So I was going back and forth between these very different spaces. And in this aerial view, you can see that there's a kind of labyrinth created by these buildings, the way they're positioned in the landscape of the city. So this is Chatsworth, one of the main entrances and the main room as you come in. In my first visit to Chatsworth, I was very struck by just the amazing amount of art. Every centimeter is covered by something incredible, fascinating objects, the way everything relates to the architecture of the building. And I wanted to approach the project as, how does this impact me personally as an artist? And I just thought, my God, what must it be like to live here? Because the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire live in the house, and there's a real sense of intimacy and something personal. It's like as if the National Gallery had been owned by the same family for 500 years. So there's a very, it's a particular atmosphere. It's different from a museum. And so to me, it just kind of triggered my imagination, thinking of improbable scenarios. It reminded me of a lot of films. For example, last year at Marienbad by Alain Resnais. Also, The Exterminating Angel by Luis Buñuel, a surrealist filmmaker. That's another image. All of these films take place in chateaus or stately homes. This is Beauty and the Beast by Jean Cocteau. So I was thinking, okay, how to approach this palace with a sense of otherworldliness or strangeness and imagination. I also thought of Virginia Woolf's novel Orlando in the sense of time travel and a gendered time travel as well. Dr. Caligari's Cabinet is another film that came to my mind. Just thinking, obviously the physicality of the stage set for this film is very different from Chatsworth, but it's a sense of a stage that's very artificial and created, because there's a great deal of theatricality at Chatsworth, and it's something I want to work with. I was thinking of the floor plan of the house, and this is actually the stables, it's not the actual house. Chatsworth on the left and Park Hill Estate on the right. So thinking about floor plan as a guiding structure for my exhibition. Also looking at the maze in the Garden of Chatsworth as a reference. I measured the height of the maze, of the plants, but also there's a wall that surrounds the maze, because the maze is now occupying a space that used to be in the greenhouse. And the walls that were holding the glass of the greenhouse are still there surrounding the maze. So I measured the height of that to think about my own structures that will support the images I want to create. So I thought I could develop, again, a body of work in photograms, and then scan those in high definition and print those onto fabrics. So that's my working idea. And I'd be grateful for your feedback, because I'm still very much in a kind of midway point of making these prints and learning so much by doing that. So the prints would be, or the printed fabrics rather, would follow this labyrinth or serpentine guided by the situated buildings. Also thinking of references like Dan Graham's pavilions, looking at translucency, opacity, and reflection. And another reference, of course, is the folding screens that you find often in stately homes. This is the floor plan of the gallery at S1 in Sheffield. So I've already placed the drawing of the buildings of Park Hill Estate to see, can this work as an exhibition plan. This is a scale model I made with some printouts of some of the photograms I've started to make in the summer. So it's very cut and paste, as you can see, but it's starting to develop the idea. And this is one of those photograms I made back in Mexico, but I just wanted to say, you all know how photograms are made, but I use very ordinary materials, photocopies made onto acetate. Most of the photos I take, I just do with my phone. I edit them a little bit, but it's a very cut and paste kind of hands-on process that I'm engaging with. So back to Chatsworth, there's an incredible layering of art. Paintings sitting on top of tapestries, surrounded by ceramics, by furniture. There's so many supports. A painting or an image can be sitting not only on canvas, but on the walls, on a kind of trompe l'oeil, a bas-relief. there's a great many sculptures as well. You almost feel like the art is looking at you because you're surrounded by all these alter egos or characters in different materials. The wonderful thing about Chatsworth is a lot of the materials are sourced locally, and were created by local craftsmen and craftswomen. So they were, over centuries, they were looking at things made on the continent, but using local craftsmanship and local materials. Before, during, and after my research at Chatsworth, I've been looking at a lot of different books, different publications, and sourcing a lot of the images also from books. I've been reading some of the diaries of Lucy Cavendish, who lived in the house in the Victorian period. Also looking at the paintings more broadly of Anthony van Dyck. He painted several portraits in the house, but also painted many people of the time of Baroque Britain. So I've been looking at some of the other paintings that are not necessarily at Chatsworth, but that were painted by him as a source of inspiration. So as I was saying, there's a great deal of theatricality in the house. There's a sense of things revealed and things that are not revealed. There's a lot of curtains, incredible fabrics and things that you feel you can see, and then there's something beyond that maybe you can't see. So there's a sense of mystery. There's sculpted ornamentation, and there's also the illusion of sculpted ornamentation on walls. So there's this back and forth between real and artificial constantly. One of the areas I was very interested in researching at Chatsworth is a small theater they have in the house that was used at the end of the 1800s and in the beginning of the 1900s. And one thing I found curious is the curtains in the audience area are actually copying the fake curtains on the set. So the curtains were actually made much more recently, copying that old theatrical set that was made 100 years ago. So fact and fiction always talking to each other. This is Louise Taff, who kindly guided me through all the material that was to do with the theater. And interestingly, she herself is a very a wonderful actress, and she played a role in Downton Abbey. So it's a lot of, again, fact and fiction, doing a little dance. Another area that I researched was textiles. So they have an amazing collection of chintz textiles, also passementerie, tassels that are just incredibly interesting to look at. They're almost like butterflies or insects, just incredible detail in silk thread and color. I also saw some of the clothing, like on the right is the dress of one of the duchesses that she wore to a famous ball, Devonshire House ball in the early 1900s. Or maybe it was a little bit before. And given equal importance in the textile collection was the clothing of Dora Lee, who was a chef. That she rose from very humble beginnings as a scullery maid and became the chef cook, the head cook at Chatsworth House. And her cooking clothes are kept in the textile collection. They also have incredible lace, Venetian lace, with this wonderful texture. This is from the 1700s. And later in September, I had the chance to go to Venice, and I visited the Museum of Lace, because the Chatsworth lace had come from Venice, I was particularly interested in going to this museum. And I was fascinated to learn about all the women anonymous women who worked 14-hour days making these lace pieces. And they were not allowed to sell their wares, only men could sell the lace. So really quite interesting histories there. Lace has a very close connection to print because books were printed as guides for the making of lace. The patterns and the designs were existing as printed books very early on. And at the end of my research phase at Chatsworth, we had a presentation with the public and a panel discussion Sash Giles, the lady on the left in this picture. She is the curator of decorative arts at Chatsworth and very kindly came to the panel discussion and shared with us her great knowledge of the collection. She was the one who facilitated many of my visits with the different curators at the house. So here I am now at CFPR, beginning the experimentation and production phase of the project. And I had sent some images, some photographic images by email to Karina and Laura Clark prior to my coming, and so that they could start thinking, Laura could start thinking about possible ways of using those images. And I was greeted by this wonderful range of tests that Laura had made. I found them absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of images of hands because I was thinking of hands as a symbol of labor, as Chatsworth is the product of the labor of so many people over centuries. Anyway, and Laura also printed on silk, and that was something I was really struck by, this print existing as a fabric. So it was something I really wanted to go with. And the first thing I did, starting my residency at CFPR, was to look at different ways of printing onto fabric specifically. So I've been coming to Bauer and working with Becky Hill as well in Digital Print Studio. And so looking at digital printing on natural fabrics and dye sublimation on synthetic fabrics, and then with Laura using photogravure and silk screen printing. So those are the four main printing methods we're using. But I've been learning so much about fabrics and spending a lot of time in fabric stores, just touching the material, looking, how does it feel on my hand? Is it see-through? Is it shiny? What does it do on the other side? It's such a tactile thing as a support. I find it really fascinating. How does it hang? Does it wrinkle? All these things you never think about with painting on canvas. And yet it's kind of like a painting, but it's also kind of like a sculpture because it's going to exist in space. So I'm thinking of this project as a hybrid between painting, sculpture, photography, and print as a kind of meta, or like a meta work made of many images. I'm thinking of it as a single work in a way. So these are images of Becky with the dye sublimation, and Laura on the right with the silk screen that we made together using these Rococo shapes. And here's some lace that we've printed. This on the left is with laser cutting onto cardboard, and on the right is screen printed onto a tulle, very, very see-through fabric. Also looking at engraving the lace pattern onto white primed canvas and black printed HP canvas. And on the right is using the laser cut to reveal the pattern as a cut through. A lot of the photograms I've been making are actually images of fabrics. So it's again this mise en abîme of having a fabric photographed and then printed onto a very different fabric than it was initially. So all of that layering and that kind of image within an image, I'm interested in thinking about. And the tassels I've blown up in size, so almost they're like as big as bells. It's been fun to see what that does. And the column, the Solomonic column that's in the oak room at Chatsworth has now become a snake. The snake is a big symbol, an important symbol in the history of Chatsworth House. And all the chintzes that I was looking at, I photographed, and now they've become black and white, and I've begun embellishing them with some gold leaf. So I am hoping to bring some painted interventions onto these printed fabrics. There's a little bit of gold leaf, and the image on the left are a bunch of oil painted ornaments that I cut out. I painted and I cut them out, and I'm maybe going to stick them here and there. Also, I ordered a kind of concertina shape in steel from Sheffield. It came in the post. So now I have something to hang my work in progress images. The one on the left is in wood, Mike White very kindly made it for me, and then the one on the right is in steel. So now I'm being able to look at the images. How do they work together? How do they operate when they're layered, one on top of the other, for example? This is an image of Chatra's house, of the staircase, where a lot of family portraits are displayed. And I've been particularly interested in certain female figures in the history of the family. This is Lady Blanche Cavendish. She died very young. She was 28 when she died, and she was mourned by her family a great deal. Apparently, she was she was very, very much loved by her family. And the painting was made after her death as memory, from memory, I guess. I photographed some drawings by Bridget Riley that are also in the collection of paintings at Chatsworth House, and drawings. And I made a dress for her. So I've been remixing the paintings at Chatsworth with combining elements from other time periods. This has now become a photogravure onto silk, and it's quite small in scale, actually, the one that Laura made. The same image has been printed, or at least the head, at a bigger scale on a different kind of fabric. So it's doing something different. So I'm kind of interested in the way it's kind of between the single artwork and the edition. It's somewhere in between those two places, where I'm repeating an image but changing it every time. The white gloves that Lady Blanche is wearing in the painting are actually in a drawer over in the textile archive. So there's all these connections in the house between images and physicality. So that circularity is something I really want to bring to my own project in some way. This is a painting of Christian Bruce with her children. She fought over 30 lawsuits against her children's estate. She was a young widow. She won them all, so she was one of the strong women of Chatsworth House, so one of the biographies I've been very interested in. And I found another painting where you see her face better, and I used it to make a photogram on the right, using this. I've used this scarf a lot, and maybe it has a unifying effect with all the different portraits I've made in photography. It belonged to my Aunt Bernie. So, and that's another photogram of the same Christian Bruce, now existing as a photogravure on silk. I also photographed the hands of many of the staff at Chatsworth House, all the guides. Very, very kindly let me photograph their hands. And some of them have become cutouts in felt, so in a way like gloves. More portraits of the family, the women of the family, remixing them in different ways. I'll just show you a few. And sculpture, I've worked a lot with sculpture as well. There's a wonderful sculpture gallery which was purposely built by the 7th Duke, I think, to be in which the sculptures could be seen by moonlight. It was part of the, there we go. The room is, sorry, there's something. Excuse me, my buttons are going a little crazy here. I don't know what's going on. I can't go forward now. There we go. Yes, so, okay. It's possessed. The ghost of Chatsworth has taken over the computer. Anyway, as you saw in a fleeting moment, those sculptures, I've been thinking about a nocturnal kind of view of these sculptures by moonlight and that luminosity. They're all kind of pale marble, and therefore, the black and white atmosphere to kind of recontextualize the sculptures has been something I've been working with. The garden of Chatsworth has wonderful sculptures as well, lots of ferns. And these sculptures are, really worked over time with the elements, the weather and the lichen growing on it. So it creates, it has a lovely effect on the sculpture as a photographic image. Okay, yeah, so I've started to look at all these images together. Some are quite busy and dense, and so I'm probably gonna have to space them out, maybe have some quieter moments in the concertina shape where there won't be image next to so many other images. It's something I still have to work out. But I'm quite interested in how all these different materials interact. Also translating Van Dyck portraits into polyester. This translation of one materiality into such a different one is something I'm quite fascinated by, in the layering. And just strange to think that a marble sculpture can become something as light and airy as that. So I'll just go quickly through some of the images I've been producing and developing, also printing on gold, because the colors of the show, normally my painting is very colorful, but for this particular project, I really want to be black, white, and gold. Those are the three colors I'm exploring. This is with the gate of the entrance of Chatsworth. And at Park Hill Estate, there was a quote in there's a lot of public art around there with text on it, which is with quotes from the people who lived on the estate. And this was a text that I photographed. There is a way of handling gold in brutalist manner, and it does not mean rough and cheap. It means, what is its raw quality? So I found that really interesting with all the gold I've been dealing with. I've been learning to use gold leaf during this residency, which has been really, really great. Also, I looked at the archives of Chatsworth, the diaries of Lucy Cavendish, as I was saying. And she made wonderful doodles. She wrote about the war in Crimea. It's just, so interesting with the time that we're living in now to think of the past. It puts things into perspective, the way history repeats itself. There are very few photographs of Lucy Cavendish. It was the very early days of photography, of course, in the mid-1800s. So I created this image of her with her, because she lives really through her text. Her writings are very evocative, much more than the photographs of her. So I have this kind of craziness coming out of her head as her imagination comes out through her writing. And the other biography I looked at a lot in the archives is Dora Lee, the chef, who worked with Duchess Evelyn at the beginning of the 1900s. And she's the lady on the far left here with the bonnet. She was, I think, a very strong woman, and the photographs of her are very, very evocative. There she is smoking a pipe and wearing a sombrero. And yeah, she trained with Escoffier in Paris. She was only 19 when she was sent there by the Guinness family. She worked for many different families in England before she went to work for the Devonshires. These are some more photographs of her kind of fending her way in a man's world. There she is with a gun, and then here she is dressed with a Mayo Scottish attire. This is one of her recipes, Lady's Delight, and it has become a photogram, and it has become various printed fabrics as well. And these are some of the images I made of her image. Another thing I've been exploring during the residency is 3D printing. I've ever had the chance to do that before, so it's been really exciting. I bought some shoes in a charity shop in Sheffield in the summer, thinking, oh, when I get to Bristol, I'm going to be able to do 3D printing. But then Fabio told me when I arrived here that this pair of shoes would not do. However, that would be fine. So we scanned the slippers. One of the slippers. And at Chatsworth, they have a wonderful collection of crystals. Georgiana Cavendish, if you saw the movie The Duchess with Keira Knightley, that's the Duchess that's represented in the film. She was the one who collected all these crystals that they have. And I was thinking of the slipper as from the charity shop in a way as a Cinderella shoe that would become glass and would have crystals kind of growing out of it. So we found the 3D file online of rock crystals and combined the two files and 3D printed it into PLA plastic, which has, there's Chuck and Angela. We kind of worked as a team to develop these glass sculptures of the 3D prints. It was incredibly laborious. And there I am with my mask, kind of digging through the plaster after the casting process and the firing. It's almost like you're an archaeologist digging out your treasure. And there it is. So I was kind of fascinated by the science fiction sort of aspect of the funnel shape. This is the funnel shape where the glass is upside down in the kiln and the glass flows into the shape. And David Huson has been developing another version with marble stone with another printer. So all these materials are just really, really fascinating for me to use and to think about. What does glass do? It's solid, but it's translucent. It can also be liquid. You know, it's a sense of transformation and flux that is really, I think, something that's happening throughout the project. At Chatsworth, there's just looking at the time. Chatsworth has a very famous sculpture called the Veiled Lady. She's supposed to be one of the Vestal Virgins. And there are many other sculptures with drapery or veils within the collection. So while I was in Sheffield, I photographed two interns that were working in the gallery and asked them, would you like to become a photogram in the printed fabric? And they agreed. So I made two photograms with my auntie's scarf. And I'm nearly to the end of the images. This is Bess of Hardwick. She was the first matriarch of Chatsworth. She was the one in the Elizabethan period. She married 4 times. She was a widow every time, married every time another very wealthy person. So she gathered the land and the wealth and started the estate. And she's wearing a very long necklace. It's a very prominent feature in this painting. It's this incredibly long pearl necklace. And as I am interested in necklaces, as I said before, I'm thinking of revisiting this, a set of black and white ceramic beads that I made previously, but I'm going to add to and make into a very long sculptural installation of ceramic beads that are about the size of a grapefruit each. But I've also started drilling through imitation coal and making a necklace out of that I'd like to include in the show. I spent a lot of time walking in the Peak District during the summer and thinking about the wealth and the resources that we take from the land and that we've taken from the land over many, many millennia as human beings. And just thinking about what does that wealth do? You know, we have to reassess the production of the land in today's time. So the coal, I guess the necklace made of coal is a complex symbol of many things. But looking so much at nature and the land in Derbyshire, and then coming back into the house and noticing all these ornamentation that is inspired by nature, by leaves, by fish scales, by flowers. It's just really interesting, that back and forth, and looking at, again, at Rococo shapes, that I'm very interested in this endless curve that appears everywhere. And so I've started making these rubber stamps to maybe make some wallpaper with them. And the last thing I'm working with now, and I'm not sure what I'll do with these. This is a collage I made of all the eyes of the women in paintings and photographs that I found at Chatsworth. And that's the mouths. The image quality is terrible, so I don't know if I can improve it. They're just photocopies I cut up, but I wanted that kind of the female gaze and then the female voice somehow gathered. And that's the last image. So I'd be really grateful for your ideas and suggestions or feedback.
Thank you. It's been fascinating, and I've seen so much more than over the last 40 minutes than in the last few months. Just out of interest, I've been listening or reading Katie Hessel's Story of Art Without Men.
I haven't seen it.
It's a fantastic book if anyone wants to read it, but it's there's a beautiful piece around talking about Artemisia Gentileschi, and her work is just beautiful, and it kind of, your work and the house really, and the kind of the women as well that you've been talking about, really kind of struck a chord with her paintings. So that was just a little observation there. Any questions for Alicia? Come to you second. If you want to pass it to Susanna.
Hi, I was just wondering if the gave you any access to actually use the jewelry or fabric to make any sort of direct photograms from the items in the archive, or whether they're considered too precious.
No, I mean, it was already amazing to have that much one-to-one time with the curators of each department, or, you know, I talked to 5 curators. Just having that one-to-one time, they're really busy, and they were so generous with their, but no, I could never, I would have a heart attack if I had to take the pieces out of the house. But I didn't have any sense of frustration. I was also allowed to visit the house on my own many times. And I was given access to the private apartments as well, and the gardens. And it was just a real privilege to be able to spend so much time and in depth looking at all these really interesting objects. But no, I didn't take anything to. If I had made a piece with like a cyanotype on site, that might have been easier. But I was kind of interested in collecting just images with my phone in this sort of almost like a spy kind of, and very discreetly and quickly. Just I have thousands of, my phone's going to explode. And then translating that in my own time, in my own space, somewhere else. Also the shift to black and white, I guess referencing all those films is another way of reinterpreting something, because it's very colorful in there. There's all kinds of, yeah, it's not black and white.
No, thank you.
Yeah, with me, it's more observation. So when you showed the picture of Chetworth's house and then the estate where you lived in, for me, they are not so different because they're monumental buildings and they're both built to make you feel small. So as a human being. And I would be quite interested in this tension between now the people who run Chetworth's house, because these are the people who would have lived in the estate. And then, you know, what comes out and how they live and what their lives are, because they're mostly invisible. They are not now, perhaps, but before. They worked the house behind the scenes. But they left their trace. So that would be for me a really interesting aspect to work out what is the visible trace of invisible people.
Yes, well, I think the house in today's time are very aware of the fact that there's all this human experience of many kinds within the experience of the house and its history. And their education team and their outreach activity is very, very inclusive, and they bring many different communities to that. You know, I saw a group of African-American basketball players visiting the house, and a group of Bangladeshi women having a tour of the house, and a group of sight-impaired people being given 3D objects to touch right next to the sculpture gallery. So it's incredible. They do go to great lengths to be as inclusive and as open as have a real dialogue with the public in as a democratic way as they can. And I was really impressed by that. But it is, and I was commuting on the bus going back from Chatsworth in the evenings, and some of the staff would be on the bus with me, and it was lovely. I photographed them as well. I met them in Sheffield. So there is a real kind of as you say, there are many. They live in the region, so there's a connections with the region well beyond the limits of the house in that way. Yeah.
Hello. How do you feel when you come across a place like this, especially for the first time? Because obviously this is such a grand, enormous estate, and you must have a lot of emotions and feelings behind it. And also, when you do get into that, obviously you've researched this so much in depth. Do you feel like as though you become a part of the house in a way? Like, do you feel like you've had a mark on yourself?
That's a really interesting question. I have had dreams about Chatsworth where it was kind of partly nightmarish, where I was running around with a drawing that had been given to me that I was supposed to return, and I had stuck a piece of tape on this miniature drawing, and the tape was tearing the paper. Oh! And I was trying to rush back through one of the 300 rooms to get back to where the drawing belonged. So it's definitely gone in deep into my psyche. Yes, I'd be delighted if my dealings with the house left some kind of mark. I hope my show will be well received. I'm still very much in that process of creating something. But I'm really excited by this dialogue that I have with them. And Sash Giles, who was in one of the slides, she's writing the text for the brochure of the CFPR residencies. So yeah, we're very much in a dialogue, and I'm so grateful for that, because it's very special. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thanks.
Think two questions. The first, you show a book of lace. Mm-hmm. Have you done any print directly from the book? I mean, to transfer images from the book?
Yeah, no, I haven't, because the book is actually to do with lace that is a little bit earlier than the lace that is in the collection at Chatsworth. I was interested in learning about that connection with print and about the history of lace. But the actual lace that I've been using to print images is somewhat later. And I didn't find the book, because by the time the lace of the collection was being made, lace had become hugely competitive in Europe, and a huge deal in financial terms. It was like the stock market. It was so competitive, and all these countries were, women were being kidnapped practically from Venice to France to steal the secrets of this incredible artwork that lace had become. And I didn't find any printed books of this period of the lace, only the one that was a little bit earlier, which is interesting, but it's not the lace that I saw as lace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second is the image is still like the mess. I think I can still see on top the one of kind of feathers.
The rubber stamps.
Yeah. Is there how do you decide how to place them? Because they look like falling, so there's also the sense of.
Well, they're just sitting on the table, and I just photographed them for the lecture, but they could be placed any way we want. That's why they're rubber stamps. So you can just do you could put them all together. You can, it's about having that freedom to arrange in whichever way.
But are they feathers?
No, they represent, some of them look like feathers. Yeah.
I think they might be like people used to have hats. Yeah. Feather is kind of the similar.
Yeah, some of them do represent feathers. I mean, they're very manneristic images of some inspired by nature and maybe rocks or seashells. So Rococo is a kind of mannerism inspired by nature. So it's a very stylized natural form.
Yeah, of course, can be leaves.
Yeah, it can be leaves or the wave, a water wave.
Very organic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to just kind of make an observation about your work as a painter and your process. You talked about the relationship between photography and print and sculpture, and that sort of layering, which I think is rather wonderful. Of being able to see through the layers of fabric in the same way that you kind of see through sort of translucency in painting. And I wonder if you could talk about that sort of that material approach or the methodological approach that you employ in that kind of construction of a painting, sculpture, print.
Yeah, in my own painting, I haven't explored translucency or layering transparent images on top of opaque images. And many painters do, but I've worked more with trompe-l'oeil and optical illusions and shadows and having the illusion of texture sitting right next to real texture, those kind of passages. I've done a lot with my work, but translucency, not so much. And this is a real opportunity to play with two images interacting in a very literal sense. So that's really interesting for me.
Thank you. Any other questions that want to offer up to Alicia?
Oh, one last thing I wanted to say, Michael Craig Martin, who's very present in the contemporary works in the collection, said we must remember that everything at Chatsworth was once contemporary.
Yes, absolutely. and the people who were collecting contemporary art as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please come with me to say thank you. And to thank all the other artists who've been presenting today and given up their time so amazingly. So to Chuck, to Tracy, to Abigail and to Alicia. Sorry, I've just forgotten your name. I go into name wang. So thank you very much.